George Soros is bad? No. There's a lot of things that he does that is good. So
name one.
I think that the fact that he's... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said he dresses well. That was a joke.
I mean, though it's a bunch of conspiracy theorists about it, he's given a lot of money for transparency and good governance all over the world, and that is a great thing. It's interesting how the left billionaires, the Gates Foundation is another one. Gates Foundation has done some wonderful work with like malaria and other causes. But it's interesting how the left billionaires who do this stuff, it's conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory.
Charles actually, or Charles Koch, I live like close to his house. I noticed a picture of Donald J. Trump on the wall of his house. I was driving, and when I got home, I got a call from my dad. Says, "Hey, you know what? Charles donated some of his money to Nikki Haley." So I realized actually the people of Wichita, they're kind of mad that he did that. They, a lot of people, whether Biden or Trump, not Nikki Haley here in Wichita. I was just shocked seeing that picture on his house, even though a lot of people actually liked him, but it was just weird seeing that on his wall.
Yeah,
real
look.
quick, I'm sorry.
Look, people, hold on real quick. People with massive amounts of wealth oftentimes will play multiple sides of these things because ultimately what they're looking for is influence. And they see the money as an easy, equitable exchange for a seat at the table where people listen to their ideas, whether they're good ideas, bad ideas. And they want their voice to be heard. And so they basically buy their way in, and that's essentially how a lot of these things work. That's definitely how super PACs are organized. And when you think about the good they do or the bad they do, in many cases they've played so many different sides. Where when somebody says, "Oh, well, they were funded by so and so," and then you look closer and it's like, well, they actually funded the opponent as well. And so it's very hard to tie something back to somebody. But when it comes to George Soros, there are some conspiracy theories. I'll give you that. But there's also just some really, really bad hombres that he's supported over the years. And again, I don't mind that he puts his money where his mouth is. Because the one good thing is that with the transparency that we do have, we're able to see who people are giving their money to, and it tells you a little bit about them. And I think there's the reason why there's a lot of people that don't trust George Soros. I think there's also a valid reason of why people might not trust the Koch brothers. But that transparency of seeing where they spend money is a good thing ultimately. But it's also not surprising to me that the things that George Soros has spent his money on, Brent would be in favor of. Brent's pretty much on the wrong side of every argument.
Well, let's be specific. You said there's some bad hombres George Soros has given his money to. Who and for what call?
Yeah, I think all of the stuff that he's doing in the realm of climate change is extremely dangerous. Very, very reckless. I think every politician, every paid-for scientist, and every philanthropist, from Soros down the list, world an incredible disservice by pushing the climate change agenda. But you'd probably disagree with that. You probably think that's a good thing.
I don't know what he's given in climate change. Like, is he funding Pacifics? Is what I'm saying. If he's doing social bad.
Yeah, let me go to Open Secrets and get you a list that I can put in the chat for you guys to all chew on. You guys could all go to Open Secrets yourself and look and see how people give their money. I want you to tell me though, of the things that George Soros is giving his money to. What are the things that you are clapping for? What are the things that you believe is bringing positive change to the world?
Well, climate change, like that's not funding a dictatorship, right? Like Bad Hombres, it sounded like it's more of the conspiratorial stuff or something. I mean, climate change sounds like something a normal left leaning person would get to. So it's kind of like big deal.
I gotta run real quick. Matt, I was driving, so I couldn't hear it. Who was saying that they set up at music festivals, sober tent?
It's a sober tent. So it's called 1 Million Strong, and so they had their first activation at Coachella, and it's 1 Million Strong. It's standtogethermusic.org, and you can find it. You can dive into that website. It's a pretty cool activation. They're doing this all across the country now.
I've got 15 years on the 15th of this month.
Congratulations. So, good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty cool where they have good festivals and hear all these people that are in recovery hanging out. Because music festivals, a lot of people in recovery steer away from music festivals, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
Yep, and there's a good reason to go to one now because you can hang out with fellow recoverers, people in recovery.
That's awesome. I just want to make sure I had heard that correctly. I'll definitely check it out. That's really cool. That's really cool.
Hillary, you said 15 you just celebrated?
No, I'll be celebrating 15 years on the 15th.
That's pretty cool, man. November, I'll hit 10 years, so pretty cool stuff.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Hillary, that Valentine's Day 15 years ago must have not worked out well for you.
I found myself up in jail. And but I consider the 15th my official date, even though I sobered up on the 14th, because it was the day that I chose to never go back to that life again. So
good for you. Good for you. I've successfully surrounded myself with a lot of people that are in recovery, and some that should be.
Well, thank you guys. I'll talk to you later. Roger, awesome room as always. Talk to you later. Bye, y'all.
I got a question for you, Roger.
Is this Mike Frager, the entrepreneur extraordinaire, the crypto expert?
Hey, let's avoid ad hominems, can we, Roger?
No,
I know you know what
compliments. That is. Jesus Christ! Can't even compliment people these days. Go ahead, Mike Frager.
Do you believe that global warming is a problem?
I believe that climates change. I believe that we go through heating trends and cooling trends, and I think that as far as a problem, it could be a problem for some people, for some species, but there's also no evidence that global warming would be a net negative across the board. I think people don't factor in how many people die from extreme cold temperatures. So when I think about the planet getting warmer, is there going to be some negative externalities from that? Of course there will be. But is there also going to be some positive externalities? Yep, you betcha. And I think we should talk more about those so then we can talk about the trade-offs rather than just catastrophize.
Okay. Are you familiar with that NASA's chief scientist comes on this app sometimes and hosts rooms?
Who are you talking about? Because there's a lot of people that claim that they work for NASA on the
Laird is his name.
Oh, yeah. I know who Laird is, yep.
So when he says that global warming is a lot more dangerous than people realize, do you think he's wrong?
I think that he's definitely highlighting the negative externalities that I just acknowledged exist. But I think that the scientific community is in large part bought and paid for. If you know how people get their money for research and for the projects that they're working on, there's a reason why people bang the same drum. And so if you get honest scientists in a room to talk about the positive externalities of the planet heating up, that's a much more interesting conversation than those that just want to catastrophize and only focus on the negative externalities.
So some places around the world get quite hot in the summer. Do you think there is an upper limit in Fahrenheit that a human can live comfortably on the surface during the summer? And about what degrees Fahrenheit do you think that is?
Yeah, look, you're trying to have a boring conversation that I honestly am not interested in. What I can tell you is that if you want to have a conversation with scientists about this, I would just highly encourage you to get people that have differing opinions so they can have an honest conversation. What typically happens when you get honest scientists in a room is it doesn't sound anything like the typical conversation that you're trying to have. Really, what it ends up turning into is an acknowledgement of both sides saying, "I don't know," quite a bit, and they'll say, "Our models show, but they could be wrong." And then when you start questioning them about models from the past, they'll acknowledge that models have been wrong. I'm not claiming that I have all the fucking answers, but when you get honest scientists in a room together, they will tell you that they don't fucking know. And so, and I think this is the arrogance part that I push back against, is when people try to pretend as if they know exactly what's going to happen, or that that there is a model, that has a track record of accuracy. Because I've studied this just enough to know that when you get them to be honest, they'll tell you they don't fucking know. That's the honest thing.
So I know you're not a scientist, but
yeah, I can repeat that. I'm not a scientist.
Do you agree that such a physical limit does actually exist for humans?
Are you now? Do you want to walk this back and say that humans would not have done as good in times of extreme temperatures, let's say like the extreme heat that is far surpasses anything that we're experiencing today, or the 6 ice ages that the planet's gone through? I think humans would have probably struggled with a lot of those extreme temperatures of the past. Are you asking this question to look back on how we would have done in the past when humans weren't here and humans had nothing to do with the climate changing?
No.
Or you want to move it forward?
No. That's not what I'm asking at all. Is there an upper limit to temperature where humans can live comfortably or at all on the surface of the earth?
I would have to imagine yes, because there's people that die from overheating. I feel like I'm talking to a 5th grader. Are these real questions that are on your mind?
Okay, well, no, we got an actual answer here. Do you know what the wet bulb effect is?
No, and I don't know how many times I have to say. Look, I think you think that this is fun, where when someone tells you, "I'm not a scientist," and then you want to ask questions about science. I don't know what
maybe you can learn something, Roger.
Well, hold on. So, why don't we do this?
I'll tell you what it is.
Yeah, well, why don't I ask you some questions about politics, something that you know nothing about? We could go down that road, right? What I'm suggesting to you is that instead of claiming to be an expert, because guess who's also not a scientist? You're fucking dumbass. And so when you start claiming that you're an expert, I can tell when somebody's being genuine or not that wants to talk about science, because people that study fucking science, I actually have somebody that studies science that just came up on the stage, a different type of science, that will be honest, that will say many times they don't have the fucking answer. But I guess, Mike Frager, with everything you know about crypto, I guess that crosses over, and now you're a climate change expert, and you're going to educate everyone, including the people that have acknowledged that they're not a scientist. Dude, I'm a fucking retard when it comes to science. But what I can tell you is that I don't fall for people's propaganda when they overstate their positions, especially when called to the carpet and asked, how they prove these things out. The same scientists will tell you that they don't know if their models are accurate or not. I mean,
you don't know science. Do you think that the climate is just a political issue? and not an actual factual circumstance.
Yeah. Well, here's the factual circumstance, and I'd like to ask you this: why are you and the catastrophizing crew around global warming ignoring the fact that the current climate and even the projections into the future are nowhere near the extremes on the hot or the cold side that this planet has experienced before? And those extreme temperatures, both hot and cold, happened before human beings were ever even on this planet. How do you explain that? The climate changing to these massive extremes before humans got here, how do you explain that and then square it with this idea that humans are the cause of climate?
Well, I mean, have you actually looked at the data? I mean, how old do you think the Earth is?
That's a great question. I think it's older than what Bible studiers will tell you. But I would venture to guess that there's not a scientist on the planet that can accurately tell you how old. And matter of fact, I'll look this up. I would bet that they can't tell you within a 1,000,000-year period, what a 1,000,000-year range of how old the planet is.
Well, what
you want to bet on that?
1,000,000-year range?
Yeah. So if they don't know how old the planet is, why are you worried about a current trend when we know, just from what we know, what we can prove?
You've admitted that you're not a scientist, so therefore you haven't actually looked at any data, have you?
I look at plenty of data. That doesn't mean I know how to interpret it. That's the problem, and neither do you. But I have a more fundamental question, and this is where credentialism gets you in trouble. First of all, you don't have the credentials, so you're already in trouble. But secondly, you're not even thinking about this logically. And I'm going to ask you the question again and see if you can answer it honestly, or we could just move on to a different topic because it sounds like you want to run from this. Why is it that we're so worried about the climate now when there was periods of time on this planet that we know that we can prove was both hotter and colder than what we're experiencing today? And this happened before humans even existed, including 6 ice ages and periods of extreme heat in between those periods. If we know for a fact that this planet gets extremely hot and extremely cold, why are you so worried about the current trend?
Well, so if you look at my PTR, this actual data from actual scientists will explain it very succinctly in a chart. And simply, I think you mostly answered your own question, which is those major extremes happened when the biosphere was fundamentally different or barely existed at all. And therefore, there were no humans to be perturbed. But when you look at the actual data, see, for instance, can you see on this picture, can you see the blue line and can you see the red line?
I can see a chart that doesn't represent anything. There's no real information here. Do you have a file that you can put? First of all, let me.
I can cite the source of this.
Well, you can cite anything you want, but let me ask you something. Let me ask you this. This is the most pivotal question here. Are you a scientist?
Do you know what an appeal to authority fallacy is, Roger?
No. You asked me about my credentials, so I'm asking.
Am I a scientist?
Are you a scientist? Are you a scientist?
That's a kind of scientist.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, okay. Boring. Dr. Jordan, how are you?
Cordon bleu.
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Do you want to talk about science with non-scientists?
Well, I mean, I think that people forget that, you have training, you have a foundational training, but then you may drift into other areas. So, for example, someone may be a climatologist and they study atmospheric rivers for their PhD, and they have a broad foundation in atmospheric sciences, but then they specialize and they work on, say, anthropogenic issues or something, right? Like then they publish in that area and they become, their expertise kind of gradually shifts and evolves. So I think we sometimes look at this notion of scientists as being, you know, all or nothing based on a diploma. And I think people who are intelligent can read the data and kind of interpret things perhaps sometimes better than scientists, because the scientists are sometimes so attached to their own work. So that's one limitation. But that being said, I guess it doesn't, like, you know, in our world, we look at, well, there's receding ice. Polar bears are spending a lot, like, as a bear biologist, this is kind of how I would look at it. So I might think, you know, okay, there's receding ice and bears are spending a lot more time in the water. It's affecting their feeding ecology, blah, blah, blah. And this could accelerate the extinction or the extinction of polar bears, for example. But what does that really mean in the scheme of things? We have wars going on in Ukraine and Israel, and whether climate change is expedited by anthropogenic influences or not, let's just say that reducing carbon can help mitigate or not, or maybe it doesn't really make a dent. I think looking at the scale of what really matters, to me, it's like not being able to see the forest through the trees. There's these people who want to save mountain lions, and that's like their whole focus in life. I mean, a lot of scientists are totally focused on one thing, forgetting that, you know, a war could come through. Like, for example, I know people who studied bears in North Africa. And when the Iraq war occurred, what did it do? It either wiped out larger populations of bears or gave us a few sightings, and population biologists were able to say, oh, wow, there were more bears than we thought or less than we thought. But what does it really matter if this war persists? We can't study them anymore. They may go extinct. So I guess my rambling here is simply to say that it all depends on what your values and what's important to you. Sure, we might be expediting climate change and having trouble mitigating it, but at the scale of looking at, you know, well, how far in the future do we have to worry? Well, we could die from a meteor. So it's like the climate change people are so gung-ho on that, and that's fine. And I tend to believe in it, but I think it's very hard for people to separate all the things out that matter. And that's, I guess, my point. Like, we can worry about the climate. We might lose a couple megavertebrates, but if we lose polar bears, that's sad. But in terms of the trophic level they feed at, that's not going to affect humans very much. It's simply going to affect polar bears.
So as someone who does biology, do you know what the wet bulb effect is?
I've heard of it, but I'm not that familiar with it or remember.
Well, let me ask you a different question. Do you know why it's possible for humans to do things like run 10, 20 miles all in a row, but it's not possible for dogs?
But it's not possible for what?
For dogs to do that, for instance.
Well, there's different angles to look at it. You could look at bipedal mammals versus tetrapods. I mean, I have to know more about what particular angle you're looking at.
Could it be that humans can release heat from their body by sweating across basically their entire skin? And then when they sweat, the water evaporates and takes the heat with it. Whereas a dog does not have sweat glands on its body, but can only release heat by panting through its mouth, limiting the heat that can be released.
Right, but when you look at hyperthermia, there's other not hypothermia. When you look at malignant hyperthermia, it kind of depends on the body mass to begin with. So even if a dog or a bear could perspire through their skin and not pant to ventilate, the amount of body heat, the mass, the ratio of mass to other variables is going to matter. So, for example, it's not about how much, whether they can run or not. It's very easy to send a grizzly bear to its death by scaring it. You're not allowed to fly low in grizzly bear habitat or really haze animals ever. Why? Because they can overheat. But it's not simply because of that physiological ecology that you're talking about in regards to perspiration. It's also in regards to body mass. So and other factors. So that's all I would say.
Got it. So basically, long story short, with the wet bulb effect is if the temperature is high and the humidity is also very high, even if humans sweat, the sweat won't evaporate because the air is already saturated with water. And basically what happens is, well, same thing that happens to those bears. The humans suddenly die. So
right,
this is one of the dangers that people will come to understand in the next coming decades as global warming hits places that are very humid, like Texas. And it becomes, during summer months, over 120 degrees Fahrenheit or 125 degrees Fahrenheit during entire months or two at the time.
So are you telling me?
Do you think that that's going to be conducive for human life on the surface?
Here's my question to you: do you really, truly, honestly? I'm 48. Do you think in my lifetime it's going to be 128 degrees in Texas and 90% humidity?
Well, did you look at the chart on my PCR?
Yes, sir.
Do you see the difference between the blue line and the red line?
Oh,
do you want me to?
Matt, hold on.
Can you see the chart?
Hold on, Matt, but both of you hold on. Both of you hold on. Mute up, Mike. Mute button. Thank you. Matt, just want to give you some advice. You can't win this battle. Mike has his autism kicking in, and right now he's all about this chart, and he wants to talk about science, and there's nothing that you could say that would change his mind about anything.
I'm okay with dying.
Well, is it only a matter of opinion? I mean,
I'm okay with dying. I'm okay with dying so long. I'm okay with dying 40 years from now because it's 128 degrees. What I'm not okay with is changing the global economy, the global elite, changing the global economy because of something all scientists cannot agree upon. Full stop. There you go.
Was it okay to change the global economy when they closed the ozone layer?
Yes, so I guess so.
Because I mean, they essentially did. They passed regulations.
That's all debatable. That's all debatable too. All this science stuff is like Roger.
That's
said,
debatable.
The
ozone layer is debatable.
Wait, hold on. Matt, listen. I highly recommend we find a different topic because right now you have Brent and Mike, two of the most autistic people on the app that are big nerds when it comes to climate change and regulation, right? They think that the gut.
Totally attracted to her, Elise?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, like, do you hook up during your fantasy or she just blows your head off?
I would prefer both.
There's a distinction between petit mort and the big death, yeah?
The little death? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big death is marriage.
Oh, God.
And the little death is an orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
Did someone say orgasm?
Hey, Billy. Hey, Al. Hey, everyone.
Hi, Roya. Hi, Rena. Hello,
Hey,
everyone.
Hey, Rena.
Elle.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
Good.
we're going to change the way we live immediately to save the planet by 2030, like OAC or whatever her name is. But we got 5 more years left where the world's coming to an end. That's according to your friends on the left. So I'm okay with dying because it gets too hot. I'll just go inside, turn the AC on. Maybe we'll make better air conditioning. Maybe we'll make better everything in the next 20 years. You realize what if you are right? But guess what? Technology, you know, fast, this supercomputing, all this quantum, all this stuff, we'll figure it out. And if we don't, we're all going to die and go be with Jesus. There you go.
Oh, are we, Matt?
Americans,
are we all
folks.
gonna be with Jesus, Matt?
In my world, I'm going to be. I'm going to be with Jesus, and you can be with your
Matt,
Jesus.
I'm saving us all by picking a religious fight so that we can move the fuck off the science and argue about God. So you're welcome.
So when Jews die, where do they go? Because you're God's people.
Oh, Matt, I was
Matt.
not actually wanting to do that to the room. We we don't go to a magical kingdom with flying cherub babies and golden gates. That's not where we go.
Well, hopefully we'll see each other when we cross over, and I'll buy you a steak.
Hey, Matt. Maybe if some of these religions would lose out on this idea that you're going to live forever in some eternal bliss, or if you live badly, you'll live in hell. If we got rid of the idea of eternity, people might do better while they're here. I actually think that Christianity and other religions that preach that, like, it's not about what happens in this life, it's what happens in the next life. I think if we worried more about this life, we'd do better in it.
I'm just gonna say, Matt, I love the purity in your response, in that you said you want to buy me a steak. So in your heaven, there's still an economy and there's still currency.
That's right. It's called Jesus dollars.
That's the best. That's the most honest representation of just your worldview, Matt, is that you were like, I'm going to have money in heaven and I'm going to buy you a steak in heaven.
Yes, it's Jesus dollars. And the steaks are only 20 Jesus dollars. And that's it. It is really, guess what? In heaven, the climate is so good.
Hey,
It's
here's
perfect.
what I can say, Matt. It's going to be the best opportunity for you goys in business because we Jews won't be there to compete.
That's right. You see, we're going to have a lot more Jesus dollars than you Jews because y'all won't be with us.
The Hindus won't be there competing. The Jews won't be there competing. Business will be good, Matt.
Sweet. I figured I'm going to tell my wife now. I'm so excited. Can't wait to die of global warming.
Can we get Stephen Bader up here?
I don't see him.
Hey, there he
Stephen,
is.
where are you?
Stephen, question for you, sir. On the 12th, are you going to participate in the Chip Roy Money Bomb?
Yes, I am.
You're a good man, sir. You're a good man.
100%. I supported Massey with his money bomb.
I was there. I saw you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and Chip Roy is fantastic. He's principled. I'll tell you, speaking of principled, and this obviously has nothing to do with climate other than the political climate. Wah, wah, wah. Anyway, today you might have heard that there was some debate going on in the Senate. I got to give mad props. Mike Lee is a stud. Mike Lee should be everyone's minimum top 3 senators. And I know that that's a low bar, but he is just a boss. He single-handedly filibustered for hours and hours and hours on end for the ridiculous fake border, foreign aid, military industrial complex bill that was going on today. And even though it didn't, obviously turn out, I was proud to see those efforts. It takes a lot of energy to be able to go on that long. I mean, take a look at Clubhouse. You probably at the end of the day, after hosting rooms, don't feel like talking much. Well, picture having to do that in front of the whole country to see for all day. But anyway, I appreciated his efforts, and Chip Roy was like retweeting every single thing from Mike and all that. But yeah, I mean, look, Rand is still my favorite, but Mike Lee is my number 2. Really smart guy, very savvy. So, people of Utah, you actually got a good senator.
I got breaking news, everybody.
Steven,
Breaking news. Can I say breaking news? I got breaking
If
news.
it has anything to do with Taylor Swift, I'm moving.
Why you gotta be so mean?
Tay has landed in Los Angeles. She's here.
That happened hours ago.
Oh, I just saw breaking news.
That happened before I left, Matt. What type of fucking horrible news?
I'm fucking terrible. We see. Oh, well, Jesus.
Hey, breaking news. Princess Diana got in a car crash. She might not make it. Breaking news.
Hey, Steven, I believe you owe me money. I don't think Ron finished with a 2 in front of his number in Iowa.
He did.
Hopefully you're a man of your word. No, I don't think he did. I believe
Ron got over 20% in Iowa.
21%. If that was the bet, you should pay up.
Yeah, it's a pay up, Brent. You dunderhead. I wasn't even serious about it, but I'll collect now that you've
Damn, he
opened your
just
mouth.
locked himself into a debt. What a fucking
No, he
idiot.
said 3. It wasn't 2.
It was 2.
Anyway.
Yep, it was.
No, was it?
Yes, it was. Thanks for the reminder.
We'll go back. We can go back and look.
I don't think
I'll be more than happy to pay up. I'll be more than happy to pay up if it was.
Thoroughly on this app, like he literally said, "Hey, where's my money? What money is that? Remember that bet when you said that Ron wouldn't get over 20%? Well, he did get over 20%. What the fuck? You are so
we can go back.
That was
we can go back. It was a 3 in front of the thing. But the foreign aid package,
bro, I don't even need it. Honest to God, like I wasn't being serious, but you don't have to pay me.
How about this? How much
I thought it was 3. I was just going to give you shit.
How much was the wager? How much was the wager?
I believe he was offering like 100. Yeah, in all honesty, I think he said 3. If he said 2, I'm a man of my word. I'll go find chat and listen to it.
So how much do you owe, Brent?
I think he owes me, but anyway, it was 100.
Okay, so it's $100. Okay, so listen, let's go get the evidence. Come back, and if it's true that you owe $100, Steven doesn't fucking need this. Why don't you just donate it? Show up on Twitter on the 12th and give the $100 to Chip Roy, and then say, "Hey, look,
there you go. Put it in mine. Donate in my name to Chip Roy."
I'd rather take a video of me burning it.
That would be a crime.
That would be a crime.
Bro, I remember the space. You were talking about how Nikki was going to be the savior and you were going to cross over, but then you were going to still vote for Biden in the general. I mean, that was actually pretty embarrassing. But yeah, look, I wish that he could have done better. I wish that he could have caught more fire. I mean, just to be candid, doing a little autopsy report of the primary, it's pretty hard to go against a semi-incumbent, and it's also hard to go against somebody who has a lot of, whether you think they're fair, unfair, founded, or unfounded, and those 4 words probably describe a variety of the cases. All of them. But I would just say, look, the perception is that here's a guy who is being prosecuted. And here's the thing that I've said multiple times on this app, and the first person on the left that's sane enough to actually take my advice will be really effective. You got to drop the TDS. You got to drop the obsession. Like all the principled conservatives who like tried to make a meaningful difference in the primary could not, because Trump's greatest gift. I mean, it's like it's hand delivered on a beautiful satin pillow. The best gift from the heavens you could ever hope and dream for is that he has all the right enemies. And it has been his greatest gift since 2015 when he first joined the primary then. And you had literal Tea Party candidates, very, very hard right candidates I was supporting, like Rand and Ted running. But the left, in their infinite lack of wisdom, didn't obsess about the people they actually had the most contrasting with policy-wise. They obsessed over Trump, who is actually, despite his rhetoric, a pretty center-right Republican. And they obsessed over him, and they hated him. And so all these Republicans who, at the time, were very skeptical of him, policy-wise, which is why Johnson didn't do half bad, is because they said, well, hang on. If the media, Hollywood, woke corporations, the communists, Soros, and everybody that basically hates me has some sort of strange, bizarre hatred of him, more than I've ever seen, there must be something to him, or he must be doing something right. And it created a sympathy in the 2016 election, and over his presidency, it created a solidarity. And post-election, in this primary, it created a cement hold. The people feel compelled to rally around him. And like I said, you can debate the individual merits of the cases of this state doing this and that state doing that, and this prosecutor being political and this one not. That's, like I said, all four of those words, fair, unfair, founded, unfounded, you could find a case and a state for each of those words. But the point of it is that the boys cried wolf a million times about Trump, and people have just become numb to the criticism, because you could have people point out, like, hey, he really done messed up on this policy, like it was absolute disaster. But then in the next breath, with the same fervor, say, oh, we should throw him off the cliff because his shoe's untied. And so when you are angry about everything, nothing gets listened to, even stuff that could be legitimate. And that's what drives me crazy as part of the, what I would say, 70 to 80% of normal people who don't have either strain of TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, or they have an irrational hatred of him, and Trump devotion syndrome, where he could walk up, slap you in the face, and you'd say, thank you, may I have another? He can do no wrong. He's perfect. The only way that we can move on from that small, vocal, but very vocal minorities of both of those two ends of the spectrum is that the 70 to 80% has got to be able to call out both. Even if you're in that 70 to 80%, you probably lean a little bit more one way or the other, whether you like them or you don't like them, but at least you try to be objective. At least you try to call balls and strikes. You give praise, you give critique, you have a balanced approach. Those people have got to be willing to call out both sides. And unfortunately, a lot of people are only willing to call out people with one strain of TDS because it's convenient. It's going to take people calling out both. And so, yeah, when you have people who criticize Trump for all the wrong reasons, when there's plenty of actual reasons you could, yeah, it actually hurts the cause. It actually makes it hard to move on. And quite frankly, I think it's the people with the TDS that have, even though they hate him more than the devil himself, they will never show the humility, the reflection, and the introspection that it will take to realize they created him, they breathed life into him, they will guarantee that he will be a staple of our politics for years to come. And until they accept it, that's just going to be the case.
I think a simpler explanation of why he's popular is he didn't want to cut, Social Security and Medicare, and he ran against immigration. And that's a popular message in the Republican primary. And frankly, that's a popular message with a lot of legacy Democratic voters, especially in Pennsylvania and places where he overperformed in 2016. I'd be the first to admit he could be the next president. I mean, if you look at current polls, I don't think is beyond, I don't think it's that predictive, but going into this election, he could definitely win. But I don't think
like it's a lot of reflection and say the left did this. The left didn't do this. The Republican Party
Oh, yes,
liked
they
the
did.
message. The Republican Party liked the message that Trump provided. Trump provided a message that attracted a lot of voters, and he won the primary, and then he won the general.
Roger, would you bring Dope up?
One of my things is that he's not getting.
I'm sorry, who am I bringing
today.
up? Nobody's got their hand raised that I can see.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, Dope Francis, get up here, because Dope is another conservative like me who supported Ron, who listens to a lot of the TDS stuff of both sides, the Trump derangement syndrome and the Trump devotion syndrome, and cringes and face palms. But Dope, just to summarize, the people who hate Trump actually benefit him more than they could ever believe. And that's the case I'm trying to make. And I know he would back me up on that. Anyway.
Yes, Stephen, you sound like someone that's has Trump obsession syndrome.
Oh, I do?
That's what it sounded like when I came in and listened to the monologue. So you can
oh my God.
That's what you
That might be the stupidest thing.
Wait, hold on. Stan. This is like, I don't know why some people that are on social audio. Hold on, guys. Everyone mute up. I just don't get why when you're on social audio and you're going to argue with someone, you don't first at least ask a question or two to establish somebody's position before then you want to have a debate with them. I mean, look, Stephen and I know each other on this app. We don't know each other extremely well, but we've known each other on this app for over 2 years, and I can tell you that if you've spent any time around Stephen over the last couple of months, or even over the last year or so, you would know that Stephen was firmly in the camp of Ron DeSantis. Win, lose, or draw, he was backing Ron DeSantis. So, in fact, he was advocating for people to not vote for Trump in the primary. Now, I'm guessing that as somebody that sits in the party that he does, that come general election, he's going to have some different thoughts and some calibration that he has to go through. But the idea that he is simping for Trump, I've heard this guy at least a dozen times try to explain to his own party members why they should vote for someone other than Donald Trump. I mean, and so listen, I'm not saying you're a bad guy for making this mistake, Stan, but if you would have just asked one or two questions, you wouldn't have had to have embarrassed yourself like that.
Look, I didn't embarrass myself. What I heard sounded like a certain way. And I don't need to say that or defend anything if that's what it sounded like.
Well, there's 45 seconds nobody in this room will ever get back, and zero value add to the discussion. But thank you as usual.
See, this is the problem I have with the people on both ends of both people. This is the problem with people who are stricken with both forms of TDS. If they hear one positive thing about Trump, they lose their mind. If they hear one negative thing about Trump, they lose their mind. And quite frankly, there's plenty of positive and negative things that can be said. But if you just dare say one hair is out of place on his head to somebody that worships him, then you're a traitor. If you say one single solitary nice thing, like he exists, he's a human being. Oh my God, you're a traitor. And it's actually I know I probably sounded a little theatrical there, but that's literally how these people sound. Like it's almost to a parody at this point.
All right, but hold on.
I literally am not.
Stephen, but we don't have to go too deep down into the personal thing. I want to get back to the point of talking about the actual issue here, and not allow the person that wanted to derail this into a thing about, you've got, you're somehow riding the jock of Donald Trump. When again, as I've stated, I've heard you for months trying to convince everyone in
But
your
people
party
with
to
the
not
other
vote.
form of TDS, Trump devotion syndrome, hated me for it because I would dare to say one thing that was positive about Ron, which the people with Trump devotion syndrome were ordered you can no longer like, even though he's the best governor in the country. Those people were in a cult. And the people who have Trump derangement syndrome love to laugh at those people and say they're in a cult, but when they point their finger, there's three pointing right back at them. I've never seen bigger cultists than the Trump haters, such as that that are all over this app. And here's the one silver lining to it all. I truly do think that the people with both strains are in the extreme minority of this country. I would safely say that 70 to 80% of this room in this country, if pressed, could actually say something nice and something constructive about him, and we would all be able to live to tell the tale. But it's the people who it's obsession that drive me nuts.
So you
Yeah,
hit a
sure.
point that I kind of want to circle back to that I think it's value to talk about, Stephen, before Stan, tried to character assassinate you there, which didn't go well for those of us who know you because it was totally off base. But people miss the fact that there are a lot of Republicans and a lot of conservatives that before Trump were sick of being told they're bad people, they're immoral people, they're this or that by the left with the, DNC driven morality complex of, if you don't believe 100% of what we do, you're a bad person, you're this, you're that, and felt like they were under attack for everything from the Second Amendment to opinions on medications to opinions on taxation. A lot of those of us on the right have felt under attack by the left for years. And when Trump came out and turned into the number one target, a lot of conservatives saw themselves in those attacks and saw what they had been dealing with from the left for 2 decades. And the Democrats did themselves a disservice by making that a thing because a whole lot of people started to identify with him that never would have because they went, look, he's under fire by the same Democratic establishment my beliefs are under fire of, and I'm going to go park my car in his wheelhouse. They didn't help.
All they had to do was shut the hell up, but they can't help themselves. And that's the problem, Bram.
So, one, I think it's silly you can't look at a whole administration and say something positive about it. I think the Abraham Accords were positive. I think renegotiation of NAFTA was also positive. But to say that this is all the Democrats' fault when the whole Republican apparatus is essentially built around owning the libs and pointing out how stupid the libs are and libs of TikTok and all that.
Libs of TikTok is actually very helpful. If you don't understand the service they're providing, then you don't.
I got it, but a lot of the political juice in the Republican Party is about owning the libs.
Well, Brett, I would argue. I would tied to what I mentioned, though, right? You do
I would argue that one of the problems politically the Democrats are having is not the focus on Trump right now. It's the lack of focus. He's not being platformed enough. He's not being constantly played on cable news. Like, if you could go back to the days where CNN was covering his podium before he came out to speak, Democrats would be doing a lot better politically. It's actually the lack of platform of him to get his crazy stuff out to the American people that is hurting Biden quite a bit.
Well, what you said just ties directly into what I had said moments before, Brett, is that decades, and I'm old enough to say this, decades of kind of this, the left is moral, the right is immoral, moral superiority bullshit that those of us from the right have heard from the left political establishment created the tone you're talking about for this enjoyment on the right of owning the libs. That didn't exist 25 years ago. It exists now because for the last 25 years, those of us who have conservative value systems and sit on the right have listened to the left label us as immoral, horrible humans, and had to listen to Democrats try to take the moral superiority card over and over and over and over. And it created this resentment that then Trump stepped into that opened this door for a large amount of conservatives and Republicans do enjoy when libs get owned because they've had to listen to the bullshit for 30 years. That approach from the DNC created the opportunity for the people like Trump to jump on and have a lot more of us go, yeah, it is fucking exhausting hearing about how evil we are because we own guns. It is exhausting hearing how evil I am because I have a truck and little Greta Thunberg's irritating ass is going to go on the news. Like, it is irritating to a lot of conservatives that we have had 30 years of getting beaten over the head with this moral supremacy bullshit, that it created the space for all of the own the libs attitude you're talking about, which is why older Republicans like myself put some of that blame on the Democrats, because guess what? 30 years ago, when that wasn't happening, you didn't have that resentment. You didn't have that frustration. You didn't have huge swaths of the Republican Party going, fuck these, coastal elitist, deep Dem politicians who want to tell us we're evil for having old school values.
So speaking of old school values, Brent, my critique of Republicans and if conservatives still exist, of conservatives, I think one of the pivotal mistakes that was made was, and I don't know who started the whole liberalism is a mental disorder thing. I think that was a Michael Savage thing, but it caught on, and liberalism became the thing that was attacked. I think personally, if Republicans and conservatives would have went on the warpath against progressives and not against liberals, and were educated to know the difference between liberals and progressives, I think things would have been better, because I think middle of the road people, if you point to liberal values, middle of the road people can look at that and go, well, I'm kind of down with some of those liberal values. It's when you start pointing them to progressive values where, normal people, unless you're really fucking stupid, and there's like a couple of them on the stage right now, unless you're really fucking stupid, you look at these progressive ideas and the weaponization that they use of government, to force their basically it's authoritarian, egalitarianism, which if you don't know what that means, it means that you're going to weaponize the government to bring upon this phony version of equality. And what you're going to do is you're going to play out this narrative where you get to pick who the victim is, who the oppressor is, whether it's real or fake, and then you're going to weaponize the government. Liberals never did that. And I don't know what you think, Brent, but I'd love to get your take. Do you think that that Republicans and conservatives would be in a better light in terms of influencing, the centrists and some of the independent thinkers to their way of thinking if they would have vilified progressives versus liberals?
Well, 100%, because it's the trade-off, right? If the Republican establishment and conservatives had taken a shot at the far left and simply left the moderates alone and said, okay, we may not agree with the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, but the old school DNCers are not crazy, but Omar Ilhan is batshit crazy, the squad is batshit crazy, and really honed in that way, you would have had an opportunity to build bridges with the moderate contingent, but you wouldn't have had the same political benefit of attacking the establishment. And so it was the trade-off. They stuck with old school politics of attacking the establishment leaders of the opposition party instead of saying, okay, let's attack the fucking crazy ideas that are coming out of the far end, and let's separate those two entities so that we can attack progressives for the crazy policy thoughts, and we can find middle ground with moderates, it would have been far more effective, but it's just not how our politics work, unfortunately.
Do you think politics will ever get back to normal, like the old Bush Clinton debate days? Do you think those days are over?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the problem we run into, Matt, is, and here's a good example even in this room. Stan just said, Bren, your comments 3 minutes came across as such of science denial, right? Nothing that I said had anything to do with science denial, right?
Do you want
But
me to
what
replay-
Stan heard was me denying science when what I said was getting beaten over the head with a moral baton is exhausting.
Bren, I'll get you a MAGA hat soon because they're just going to keep pushing you further and further right.
I can't.
No, I know, bro, but that's what's happening next with these people.
Hold on, though. You know me. I'm in treatment mode. My brain is going to be slow if I get derailed. But it's a good example for why we can't have the middle ground political discussions anymore. Because I said nothing that a normal person would have viewed as science denial, right? I honed in on moral supremacy as a baton in politics, and Stan here heard me as a very clear science denier. And so as long as people are going to hear things that are not said, and they're going to say, hey, you're on this side, I think you're this way, in the same way that Stan characterized Stephen as a Trumper, when that's not at all what was being said or at all what he stands for. The reason why we don't have old school politics is because old school politics was you can take a libertarian, you can take a Republican, you can take a Democrat, and you can put them in a room and have them have a conversation about policies. And then when asked to repeat the policy the other two said, there would be an honest representation of what the other person said. They wouldn't agree with it, but it would actually sound like what came out of their mouth. And politics now are villainizing whatever somebody just said and needing them to be wrong and evil and indecent instead of just having a different opinion. Civil discourse of politics is gone.
I think if Stan was asked to Steel Man what you said, he'd burst into flames.
So I don't think you're evil, but I do think you're doing a bit of rewriting the history of our politics. The Republican Party in the 80s and 90s did a lot of hitting over the head of liberals with a moral baton. I mean, Democrats might have complained about Atwater's Southern strategy, but you had Jesse Helms, calling liberals godless, whatever he called them. So this whole is, let's point at the liberals.
Brett, when did I say that didn't happen? So here's the point of clarification.
But you're making it like a one.
No. When did I say, please point out the point in the conversation where absence of me saying something is not me pretending it didn't happen, right? What I said was, all the aggressive energy that Trump took advantage of, a significant amount of that, was built up on the right, where I have existed, worked politics for years, and I'm old enough to have watched this happen, to where large swaths of Republicans and conservatives got exhausted with being called evil, racist, fear-mongering, gun-owning pieces of shit. And then Trump came out and was attacked with those same attacks. And people said, oh my God, I can see myself in this guy because I've been attacked this way. I'm not saying that there were not Republicans who did the exact same thing to Democrats. I was simply pointing out very specifically that the own the libs attitude that is so prevalent in my party came out of those 30 years.
You had a period of politics where there was give and take. There were people saying bad things about each other. I don't doubt that in Republican circles, because I know a few, they feel kind of morally marginal, but there's objective reality and there's perception. And I would argue, if you look at the history of that period, what you saw is Jesse Jackson saying some things, but you would also have a Jesse Helms saying some things back, and that was normal politics. But the kind of right developed this on the lips type of attitude, and that kind of fed into Donald Trump. I just think like just pointing to the far left or even the far left and saying this is your fault is just kind of silly.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So, as someone who's been involved since early high school, so about 15 years, it used to be that Republicans were the adult in the room. They were the dad. They were the, little bit stiff, little stuffy, little stick in the mud, but you could depend on them. And eventually, we got sick of the gaslighting, sick of the BS, of constantly being berated as being hateful, as being dumb, as being evil. And what's sad is that's what gets heard in a lot of public schools. I'm just going to be honest. I went to a great public school. I was in the best public school district in my state. And even in my school, at all levels, I heard nothing but liberal talking points directly integrated into the curriculum, into the classroom. And if it was not for the fact that I at least was exposed to conservative concepts by my family, and that I had a question with boldness attitude, and that when the administration tried to, silence the ability to think on the right, it ended up slingshotting me the other direction and getting more involved and doing more. I could unfortunately be some sort of a lib. And there's a whole generation of people getting churned out that way. And the people that make it through are sick of it. The people who managed to get through before it was as prevalent as it is today are sick of seeing it. They want their kids and grandkids to not be brainwashed and bullied and coerced. I mention often that intersectionality is essentially one giant horse pill, where they've taken all these different communities that don't have anything to do with each other, shoved it all into one horse pill, and saying that everything's the same and it's all this and you have to endorse the whole shebang, swallow it. And people are walking away being like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. Everything used to be suit and tie. I mean, almost to the point of guy living up to the country club stereotype. And then Trump came along and he popped the balloon and shocked the world. He literally just walked up and popped the balloon. Picture it, hear it. I want you to literally see and hear a balloon popping. And Trump has completely changed the way that people talk about politics. And it slings completely the other direction on the spectrum. And so, yeah, I mean, you guys want to talk about how it's changed? It absolutely did.
Yeah, it's more ghetto now, for sure. We've definitely lost the quorum.
Okay, so I want to add a little clarification to something I said, though, just for the room and for Stan. When I brought up Greta Thunberg, it wasn't because of her stances. It's because she's an irritating, petulant little cunt. And she's a good example of the young progressive attitude and image of this moral supremacy bullshit that a lot of older conservatives like myself, gag on. So it's my criticism of her is almost never on what her beliefs are, because the conversation about the science is a conversation that you can have experts talk about, and that's fine. Having a child younger than my own children try to take some sort of moral stance about a world she's barely lived in is intolerable and irritating. So my attack on her was not an attack on science at all. It was an attack on a particular type of young progressive and the way they communicate and the way they're received by an older conservative generation. So anyone who took it as science denial, let me clarify, anytime I criticize that particular little creature, it's because she's a petulant, irritating little bitch that represents a type of archetype I don't enjoy and has nothing to do with her science stances.
So two things. One, from Stephen's point, those Republicans that used to be country club, a lot of those professionals are now what we call Democrats. The Republicans now used to be in the Democratic coalition, kind of the white working class who Trump appeals to. So some of this is the people we call Republicans are just different than the people that we used to call Republicans. Second point, mentioning Greta, there's annoying right-wing activists too. Defining the Democratic Party or liberals by on the far right, I think is silly when the Democratic coalition is a lot more conservative than it gives credit to. I just saw Cori Bush is losing by 22 in her primary. There's a reason why Joe Biden was a nominee, is because he was to a lot of voters in the South looked like the more conservative choice. So I just think there's a lot of demagoguery, or there's more effective demagoguery of the Democratic Party, of the voices on the far left, than there is effective demagoguery of the Republican Party with voices like Nick Fuentes.
Well, let me jump in, Matt. Let me jump in.
Hi, Jay. How are you, bud?
I'm fantastic. Hey, good evening. So, I was listening to Bren's take, and in a few words just stuck in my mind. He said, bitch. He said, cunt. And another word, twat waffle, came to mind. And all those words are appropriate, Brent, because Steven's a bitch, ML's a twat waffle, and IO is definitely a cunt. So I hate to gaslight the room, but that was just my feelings. And Greta Thunberg is a lowlife. Take it for what you want, people. I don't give a fuck. There's my take. Thank you, guys.
Bro, the girl's like 17. Why do we focus so much on this woman?
No,
she's like a
17.
teenager. Who cares what a teenager?
She's an adult. She's an adult.
Okay, first of all, she's 21 years old. She's made herself a public figure. I brought her up as a particular archetype. There are others. She's just one that I knew the entire room would know who that was. And she engages in a way that is just irritating and hard to tolerate if you are an older conservative. And so I was using her as an example of a progressive. I do think that Brent has a point that, if the criticism is about the progressives, that's not necessarily a DNC criticism. And everyone who knows me knows I don't generally take shots at the DNC. I take shots at the far left fringe because I think they're fucking psychopathic pieces of shit most of the time. And I don't really see any sort of competency on the far left, right? The second piece, Brent, is you brought up Nick Fuentes. Here's where my perceived difference is. If you go into a room of conservatives and you have 100 conservatives, you have me, you have Steven, you have Monica KKK, you have, the whole span. All of us are in there, Abby's in there, and you bring up Nick Fuentes. 60 to 70% of us are going to immediately own he's a racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic piece of shit. And he hung out with kitty diddlers and all these things, right? A significant amount of the room is going to acknowledge the criticisms about that person. If I take 100 Democrats and put them in a room and start to criticize Greta Thunberg the way I just did, the vast majority are not going to be honest in criticizing her, are not going to be open and willing to criticize her. So yes, there's irritating far end people on both ends, but as a Republican and a conservative, we are happy to eat our own if they step out of the line, and we are happy to eat our own publicly. The left protects and encapsulates these people with magical fucking shield and isn't willing to do the same. So in terms of self-policing, my frustration is always that even moderates on the left are not as vocal as they reasonably should be in resisting the far left as moderates on the right will say, you know, Trump's a piece of shit. We don't like Trump. We're stuck with him because 26% of our party does. But you don't hear the pandering in the same way. And that's where I draw the distinction between, you know, you saying, hey, there's a Nick Fuentes who's irritating and over the top over here, and there's Greta Thunberg who's irritating and over the top here. It's just not really comparable to me, and it's not even got anything to do with where I stand on the issues. It's just we're happy to condemn our fringe far-right pieces of shit. The day the left is willing to condemn their far-left fringe pieces of shit as willingly is the day I will say, yeah, no, things are level.
I mean,
You know,
Nick
hold on,
Fuentes
Brent,
is
Brent, hold on one second. I do want to hear your response, but I do want to say that, Brent, you're correct, but I think it's good to highlight some of the positive change that I'm starting to see. One of those things would be there are Democrat donors that are now putting their money together to primary members of the squad. I don't know if you saw, it was Cory Bush, one of them, is trailing their rival, by like 20%. And so they've amassed already $100 million fund. And these are Democrat donors. They haven't even reached across the aisle yet for help. They want to primary these people. And so this is a positive development. The Rashida Tlaibs, the Ilhan Omars, the Cory Bushes, they're done. And so I think you're right in your general criticism, but I think we're also maybe living in that moment where that change is about to come. But
so Nick Fuentes is absolutely easy. I mean, he's a Nazi. So he said just extremely vile things about Jewish people, including calling for their extermination. But what about somebody like Charlie Kirk? I mean, Charlie Kirk's pretty problematic as far as his rhetoric, and you wouldn't see that level of discussion on him if I went into the same room. Yeah, on Cory Bush, I think you see this in a lot of city elections. You see the more moderate Democratic candidate win. I mean, Cory Bush is a point, I brought up. She's losing it in her primary. I mean, politics is local, and the Democratic coalition isn't as liberal as it is in the minds of a lot of conservative actors.
So here's what I would say, and this is where I do wish more people would come out of the echo chambers of media and actually engage with people from much different political spectrums than they are. Charlie Kirk is massively criticized on the right by moderates. Charlie Kirk and his Turning Point USA is criticized heavily in huge sections of the Republican Party. So the minute you brought him up, I chuckled because he's often criticized in the party easily. And it's like, I do think that, a lot of Democrats don't understand that while Republicans will hold our nose and vote for Trump to avoid another Democratic administration, the amount of space in the spectrum that is the Republican Party is a very wide bandwidth, and it's a bandwidth that's happy to criticize itself from the far end on each end all day long, every day. There's not a hesitation in Republican circles to criticize Republican figures. There just isn't.
So,
and anyone who thinks there is doesn't really understand.
They do it too.
So would you hear criticism from like a Jonah Goldberg of Charlie Kirk? Absolutely. And I acknowledge there's definitely voices on the right that think Turning Point is poison, which it is poison. That said, you can say the same thing about the squad. I mean, there's a reason money's lining up behind primary the squad. But what I said is, if we went into a clubhouse room, would you hear that? I don't think you would. I think Charlie Kirk, if you mentioned his name, we get it passed.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I used to spend quite a bit of time in conservative clubhouse rooms. And while there's definitely, no shortage of idiots that participated in that, and Brendan and Stephen can back me up on that. You had a lot of different flavors. If somebody forget about Charlie Kirk, because he's kind of his own little media sensation type of thing. But take someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, that's actually an elected official. When that name came up, you would have this. I would say about a third of the people in the room that would be like, "Oh, really love her, die on that hill," and then you have another third that's like, "Oh, fucking can't stand her. She really makes us look like assholes," and then you got the other third that's like, yeah, I'm just not going to fight with my own people because I've got bigger fish to fry with, fighting with the other party. And so that's kind of how I witnessed it. And believe me, and Stephen can back me up on this, when I go into those rooms, I would light people up. I don't go into a Republican space to kiss everybody's ass. I go in there to tell them all the things that I think is stupid about what their party is doing. But there are sane people in that party. And there used to be sane people in the Democratic Party. The sad part is the sane people in the Democratic Party, they don't even want to be in it anymore. If anybody that had an ounce of sanity, they've gone on. Now they're no labels. They don't want to be labeled. And I can, even though like Joe Manchin and I, politics, are pretty diametrically opposed, but at least he's not a radical like the far right or the far left. But I don't think it's a fair criticism to say that that Republicans don't rein in their own. Dude, the Republicans just fucking reined in their own when they didn't like what the speaker had to do. Democrats would never have the balls to do that. They would. Now, you could argue that it was a bad move. You could argue strategically it wasn't smart to do that. That's fine. But Republicans will absolutely stand, for their version of what they believe the party should be doing. You have the libertarian strain, you have the neocon strain, you have the paleo-conservative strain. You have these different factions, and then you have MAGA, whatever the fuck that is. And so, there's definitely a lot more going on there, and so I don't think it's an accurate description at all that people turn a blind eye to that. I just think that's completely dishonest.
Indeed. I think that we actually are overly critical of our side to a fault. In fact, one of the most common things that I'll hear Republicans say is, "Look how united the Democrats are. Why can't we be more like that?" And there's a double-edged sword to that wish, because if we were to think that more way, it might actually be a difference in our literal philosophy. I think that it's ideological why our parties are more individualistic versus collective, because it's actually reflective in what we think the role of government and society and culture and all that economics is supposed to be. When you think of people as a group, you're naturally going to fall more in line. When you think of people as individuals, you aren't. And so there's pros and cons to that in terms of politics. Like you said, with the whole speakers battle, I think that was a net negative, but the fact that it happened was very impressive. I think it's undeniably impressive. It's probably one of the biggest feats achieved in the House, right, wrong, or otherwise, in a long time. And you would never see that on the other side. Pelosi, Hakeem, Schumer, they've got their congregation by the huevos, absolutely just locked in a chain. And they count the votes and they whip twice. And that's just how they roll.
Criticize certain things, or we tolerate this or this. The reality is that Republicans are in a position in the last decade or so of having to be pragmatic. And anyone who's ever been in rooms with me talking about politics understands I can't stand Donald Trump. I would love a world in which he would just vanish and we didn't have to deal with it. But 26 to 30% of our party, our side of the aisle, are Trumpers, are MAGA, and that's a reality. And so when you're dealing with being a particular side of the aisle or being part of a party, and you have to coalesce around, neither party does a true platform anymore, which is sad, but party ideology, like Stephen was mentioning, you're going to find that Republicans and conservatives have a lot of internal fighting over where we should be, which is why, yes, you can say there's the GOP and there's the Republican Party, but the reality is there's the Trumpers, there's what's left of the Tea Party contingent, there's your old school Reaganite moderates, there's your slightly less moderate that I wouldn't call Reagan era, and then there's kind of some filler. So there's 3 or 4 major cliques inside of the GOP and then some filler space, which forces the party to engage in a different way. When you look at the Democratic Party, there's old school DNC corporate, like Pelosi, like Schumer, and then there's essentially the far end progressives. And maybe there's some people in the middle, but the party leadership as a whole is able to just rein in those votes in a way that is completely different. And then I always laugh because the criticism that comes from the left of Republicans is that, oh, well, you don't hold your own accountable, you don't do this. There's so much more debate on the Republican side of issues and stances than there is on the Democratic side, because we just don't coalesce in the same way. And I think Stephen made a really good point bringing that up. But it's always funny to me that that's always a big criticism. And it's like, I don't know how much more internal infighting and discussion you want to see in a political party than we have on the GOP right now.
I will say, like, with all due respect, like, define funny. Like, you're making a lot of assumptions based on what's going on in a very combative and very situational situation, like what's going on in Israel. And to make light of that, I'm not saying you are making light of that, but overall, that's not cool. That's not fun. There's no situation where you can say, okay, we're going to have this engagement in a negative way based on what's going on in the Middle East. There's no reason, and I think it's very sad.
Okay,
And,
does anyone else understand what the fuck he just said at all?
I
No,
I'm
not
being
a
honest.
bit.
Did anyone
Hang on, real
understand
quick.
what he just said?
I'm a dumbass.
Bren, are you seeing any hands raised? I don't know if the room's glitching.
I can say it again if you want me to. I don't know what you're speaking of.
Well, I just asked
Bren,
the
would you
rest
mind
of the
sending
room
a
for a
direct
quick response.
invite?
1 second, Stefan. I'll look at it in a second because I'm not seeing any hands raised. But I can reset. Did anyone else on stage understand what David just said?
Yes.
No.
Okay, that was my point, David. So maybe
It's a very
try to
simple
say it in a
statement.
different
I kind
way.
of did. I understand.
It's not my fault that you're not able to understand the situation, but
I don't know
fine.
what's funnier, that
Okay,
nobody
so
could
pause 1
understand or that
second.
Stan could understand.
Yeah, so pause 1 second. I wasn't saying it in judgment, David. What I was saying is, and I do this in the room with a lot of people.
But that's okay. I feel judged, but
Is
that's okay. I'll take it off. It's
okay,
fine.
let me finish what I'm saying. Is in order to have a conversation, people have to understand what the fuck you're saying. And I know that if I don't, a good part of the room probably didn't get it. So I was stopping you so that you can reframe what you said and maybe take a second bite at the apple in a way that might be easier for the room to get, because I didn't get at all what you were talking about. We hadn't mentioned Israel in over an hour. There was no connectivity between what you were speaking on and what the room had just been talking about. So if you could try again, that'd be wonderful.
Bite the apple.
Okay, or not. I mean, it's fine either way. I was just more saying I was not understanding, so I could assume part of the room probably didn't get it either. I am having issues bringing people up, Roger. So if you could try, that'd be.
I've been trying to. I've been struggling to do the same. So I don't know what's going on with it. I don't know if it's glitching. If you're talking about Dope or whatever his name is, I've tried about 10 times with him.
Can we talk about
Would
Stormy
you mind
Daniels just for a
if I
moment?
dropped and came back up? If you just modded for just a second, see if I can pull some people up. I don't need the badge. I'll just try and help.
Go for
All right, Dope. Let's see if this works, bro. I just sent you an invite. Can you get up?
And here.
Worked for me. Oh shit! Wait a minute. We got Wallace up here. What the fuck? Is it a special occasion? Let's play Retard Day. What's up, Wallace?
Oh my God! Wow.
Wallace.
No, you're able to pull people up. It's working now.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Wallace.
but Dope still.
Hold on. Wallace is an interesting one. He comes to the rooms. He does the emojis pretty religiously. We never really kick him out of rooms, but every once in a while we'll bring him up on the stage and he'll just sit here quietly. And then he'll like fucking Tourette's will come off mic, say some really crazy shit. And then it's like, all right, Wallace, into your day. I don't get Wallace. I just don't get him. I don't dislike him. I just don't get him. It's like watching like a foreign film without fucking subtitles. It's like, yeah, it's beautifully shot, but I don't fucking get it.
Perfect. That's great.
You see? See what I mean?
Well, we have a little
I just came up to show that it's working, that you're able to pull people up, and
But have we
I've
been able
enjoyed
to
all
pull
day.
up Dope? That's the person we're trying to that's stuck.
Oh, well, I guess I'm just lucky. It's been great all day, though. Love the.
I didn't try inviting you up because you didn't have your hand raised. But I've been trying.
I think you're seeing. I don't think you're seeing every hand because as soon as I became mod, I was swimming in hands.
The only one I saw was Dope, and I couldn't bring that up.
Gotcha. Well, for some reason, I can't seem to bring Dope up either. It's bizarre.
Maybe you leave the room and come back and see if they can get you up.
Maybe he's banned. Maybe he's been a bad boy.
Oh, are you saying that like the house itself can?
No, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's got to be an explanation, and I don't have one.
If I leave, sometimes it'll block me from coming back in. So I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes we just don't want you back in.
Why? I'm awesome.
You definitely provide entertainment. Like, there's always got to be, how like on a sitcom, they'll bring somebody that just brings the retard energy, and it just, it brings levity to the show. Like, it's like, Brent, you're that for us. Like, I mean, you're definitely never going to be the star of the show. You're not fucking Fonzie, but you could definitely be Ralph Malphrey.
If I ever bring the retard energy, please tell me so I can leave and never.
Liz, you have never brought the retard energy. You have never brought bad energies to this space. You bring the drunk energy to shitty humans sometimes, but I appreciate you for it.
Oh, sometimes she's drinking twisted tea.
Only in private, small social spaces of good people.
If you take a look at this stage right here, you have a whole buffet of the right. That's what really is amazing to me, that somehow we're like seen as non-policing. Like, I'll be honest with you, like from a strictly political, strategic point of view, we're actually so not united that it's a problem. So of all the things to criticize the right, that somehow people don't speak their mind critically is, it's not even laughable. It's just astounding. We are so individualistic. It's actually politically damaging, but it philosophically makes sense because, like I said, if you naturally have more of a don't tread on me attitude in your politics, it's going to reflect in how you conduct yourself as well. And not saying, well, I don't have to go with the crowd. I don't have to go with what the group says. It's just you're naturally compelled to be that way in all aspects of your life, and including how you move in politics.
So every year or two, and you'll appreciate this different, every year or two, there's a big federal judicial conference. And about a third of the federal judges in the country go. And it's hilarious because if you look at the Democratic appointed judges, they're all in one big giant circle on one side of the room. And then you have very clear, almost divided by the president who appointed them, Republican judges. And you have all the originalists in one corner. You have the moderates in one corner. And these are all people who've known each other for many, many years in some cases, but there's this clear division of, oh, we're this type of Republican, I'm going to come over here. And it's the part of my career that makes me laugh where it's the most visible, where it's like, no, we self-segregate almost immediately upon entry.
Bader's point is well taken, because I think more people on the right, just this is a generalization, so don't come at me because there's always exceptions, but more people on the right tend to be free speech absolutionists and very much constitutional, really believe in constitutional to the T. And so we think freely and we speak our own minds a whole lot more. We don't tend to go with the flow and suppress somebody's speech because it hurts our feelings.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I think that there's been just as many affronts on the Constitution, including on the First Amendment, coming from the right that I've seen from the left.
Example?
Yeah, well, if you want me to go holistically against the Constitution, the biggest violation that I've seen in my entire lifetime was bipartisan, but it was led by Republicans, and that was the Patriot Act. And so,
Team Patriot,
yeah, and you guys. What's funny is now stop it. The problem is now Republicans try to distance themselves, except for Bryn. At least Bryn owns the fact that there was, Republicans were on this whole like fuck the Fourth Amendment. They just loved it. They were just like, oh man, safety over freedom all fucking day. And Republicans do this quite a fucking bit, actually. When I look at the First Amendment, I see a lot of weird things that come. The whole idea of restricting, what kind of information that people can access. Like these pushes back in I don't know how old some of you guys are, but when they were trying to say that people shouldn't have pornography, I don't mean children not having it. I don't think children should be exposed to it. But when people like Larry Flint were fighting his free speech battles, he certainly wasn't fighting a free speech battle against the fucking left. And you know who else wasn't doing that? Howard fucking Stern. There was plenty of people when Larry Flint and Howard Stern, two of the biggest, I guess provocateurs that wanted to push the envelope of the First Amendment. Their opposition came from conservatives, and so I think people should get off their high horse about how one side supports the Constitution, the other doesn't. Matter of fact, I don't even have to go back in time. We could just go to Donald Trump, some of your dear Lord and Savior, fucking Mr. Orange. This guy fucking wants to ban bump stocks. Then he says, grab the guns first, worry about due process later. I mean, like, honestly, the hits keep on coming. When it comes to gun rights, some of you motherfuckers act as if like Republicans are have a great track record on protecting the Second Amendment. If anybody lived in California and is old, they might understand that Ronald Reagan and the National Rifle Association, the Republican Party, fought to ban guns in California. Why? Because the black asshole Republican Party corrupt as shit.
Police unions are still the biggest lobby against. constitutional theory.
Ronald Reagan.
National Rifle Association. I don't know why people are interrupting me, man. I'm about to mute up, and I'll go back into mute for quite a while. So I'm about to go grocery shopping. But no, you wanted examples. I could keep giving them to you, but the bottom line is you won't accept those because you're one of these folks that likes to put on the party uniform. You know, you wear red. You got the R. You got the R. You got the red. You're the constitutionalist. And I just don't fucking buy it. Hell, I spent 2 years on this fucking app listening to you guys sit around and jerk off Jock, who's talking about he wants to repeal the 19th Amendment and doesn't think women should vote. Don't talk to me about your support of the Constitution. You're fucking bull.
Well, as far as Larry Flint, I'm old enough to remember all that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was just conservatives not liking it, period. But I don't think they were trying, and especially because that was the same era that there were limits on what you could say on through radio waves and on TV. And I think they were more fighting that it was not that they couldn't say it, but that where they could say it, like on primetime TV, that kind of stuff. That's what I remember it as. I couldn't care less. I think Larry Flint was a disgusting piece of crap. He had every right to say what he wanted to say and print what he wanted to print. I don't know a lot of Republicans, or my friends at least, who are absolutionists that don't like it, but nobody was telling them that you had to put them in jail if you did.
Are we talking about Larry Flint, the founder of Hustler?
Yeah.
Roger.
Oh, yeah. Dude, when it comes to the First Amendment, there's nobody that's a bigger fucking
Do the hustle.
Yeah, exactly. He was a vulgar, disgusting idiot, but at least I knew that he was. He didn't pretend that he was something else. It's kind of like, I liken him actually to why people hate Trump, is because they just hate his personality. And, I think Larry Flint it was disgusting what he was, trying to do, but
I'm just going to
people
say,
get hysterical, and he had the right to say it. He had the right to print it.
If I survived an assassination attempt and was paralyzed and stuck in a wheelchair, I would probably have a horrible personality too. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you'd be grateful that you're alive. Who knows? And you try to do something great instead of just be bitter your whole life. I think you'd have a choice. Some people make a choice to be bitter and angry. Some people make a choice to make their life better.
Well, the First Amendment was live and well today. We allowed Bruno to speak. That guy doesn't even speak English, and we're just like, yeah, just say words.
So I have a quick, because I'm trying to grasp the understanding here when it comes to the First Amendment and a part of it, which is free speech. Doesn't it pertain just to the government, Congress in itself, rather than the individuals?
I don't even understand that question.
Like free speech, First Amendment, it is pertaining to the power of Congress and government, not per se the civilians. So therefore, the government cannot restrict freedom of speech. But let's just say you have someone that is on the far right and they are within the government. They then can utilize that, element of, and a lot of businesses do it, platforms do it, where they do restrict the speech due to that, not of being in the government, but being through its own platform or business. Then they restrict it. Let's just say for Facebook, for example.
Well, if they're private, yes. People can restrict anything, but you don't go to jail if they can stop you from coming in and into their restaurant, per se, if you have a filthy mouth, but you're not going to get arrested. You can still freely say it.
No. So the thing about freedom of speech in the First Amendment that people miss, right? And it's in alignment with what you're saying, is that, yes, in its core, it's that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress, right? It has to do with the government not suppressing your ability to speak, express, protest. And we have expanded that into spaces like digital content creation, speaking on radio waves, speaking on media, speaking in private forums. But there are different applicabilities if you're at a forum, if you're on private property. There's captive audience clauses, there's prior restraint, libel, slander, defamation, the concept of absolute privilege of intellectual property. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of little pathways and tributaries that you have to go down to if we're having a legal discussion about what does freedom of speech mean, right? So if I own a restaurant and I don't want to rent my restaurant out to, a KKK member for a meeting, I have every right to do that, right? I'm not suppressing their freedom of speech. I am saying I'm not allowing that in my private business. And that's perfectly permissible, in the same way that a college, university institution can say, hey, we are not allowing this particular person or this type of speech. There's a lot of space inside of today's applicability of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, that has expanded from the original text of the First Amendment. There's books and books and books of federal case law at this point, and precedent-setting cases that make restrictions viable in certain ways, whether they're government or they're private. And there's an expansive review anytime we create a new type of space, right? When you have audio apps, you have Facebook, social media, the First Amendment has been stretched at this point in the courts to specify what type of freedom do you have in a non-physical forum, right? What type of freedom of speech do you have on an app like Clubhouse? What type of freedom of speech do you have to post something on the World Wide Web or on your own blog? There's a wide array of what is and isn't allowed that people don't realize, from obscenity, commercial speech, private speech, government speech. These all have different guidelines to them. So most Americans have no understanding of what their quote-unquote freedom of speech actually looks like. But there's a lot of situations where you can be hemmed in, and anyone who's an absolutist of freedom of speech, which I am not, by the way, but a lot of people in this room are, understand that we are a far cry from having absolute freedom of speech in this country.
I agree with that. You're absolutely right in everything you said. But when I say I'm an absolutist, it's with the understanding I can't cry fire in a theater. I mean, there are exceptions. I think when I say absolute speech, absolutionist, if I'm in a room with somebody who is a KKK member and he just wants to go off and spew his hateful rhetoric, I think he has the right to do that. And I don't think we, as disgusting as I would think it is, and as much as I would argue that he was, and have exercised my free speech to tell him what an idiot he is, he has the right to say it. Now, would he have the right to say it on national TV? Absolutely not, I don't think. And I don't know. I guess he could, but I understand the point you're making. I think where most Americans don't understand is the opposite. They think that if we're talking about somebody like Charlie Kirk walks on their university campus, that God forbid he be allowed to say anything conservative or evangelical or anything, and that he shouldn't be allowed to be there. and they think he has no right to say it, and it's violence. His words are violence, and they have to be escorted off. And I mean, that's more where American citizens don't understand free speech.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like beat this up, but yeah, for example, you have like hate crimes or hate speech, I should say. Hate speech, that's very much, and you're correct. Well, for me, I don't agree with hate speech, but it is still, the government, they can't say anything when it becomes hate speech, but there are still consequences outside of the government, and that's socially. Socially, we do things, but and I agree with you. A person that practice hate speech, they have that right pertaining to the government, but then you still have consequences socially. But the government will step in when that hate speech becomes a